Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Lil Dudes Insect Academy podcast. I am here in Washington, D.C. this year at the ESA conference with my friend Sean, and I'm super excited about this episode. Super stoked to talk with him on the show. So, welcome to the show, Sean. Go ahead and introduce yourself for us.
Hi, I'm Sean Prager, and I come from the University of Saskatchewan, which is in Western Canada.
Nice. Okay, so we'll jump into that a little bit. Yeah, so we're gonna jump into that a little bit more in a minute. But before we talk about that, let's talk about your schooling and how that has gone. So, just kind of walk us through some of the things you've worked on in your schooling, where you went, and who you studied under.
Okay, so I am in Canada, but I'm actually originally American, so that's a detail some people might care about. So I went to school in New England, and I have a degree. My undergraduate degree is in ecology and evolutionary biology.
Okay. And
in geography. And so I worked on mosquitoes as an undergraduate.
Nice.
Had two choices. I could work on fish or mosquitoes. And somehow it started with mosquitoes, and then I worked on insects and arthropods ever since. So after I finished my undergraduate, I was fortunate enough to take a year off, and I actually lived right down the road at the University of Maryland.
Nice.
Where I worked on a strange kind of fly called a stock-eyed fly.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So I did that for about a year while I was trying to decide what I wanted to do. And then I went to graduate school in Canada at basically at Brock University, so that's where I spent most of my time. And I worked on carpenter bees. So
nice.
My PhD is
Very
from
cool.
working on carpenter bees. And then when I finished my PhD, I moved back down here, and I actually worked at Delaware at a Department of Agriculture lab, and I studied little parasitoid wasps that attack aphids. Then I moved for another postdoc, and I studied psyllids, which are a sucking insect, kind of like an aphid. They eat all kinds of things. The ones I worked on eat potatoes. Then I moved to California, where I continued to work on the same insects for a long time, and then eventually moved to Canada. And now I have a big lab that I sort of run, and lots of students, and we work on all kinds of cool things. So we work on psyllids and leafhoppers, so another hemipteran, another sucking insect.
Yep.
And we work on bees and some weevils.
Nice.
And some lady beetles on occasion, and lygus bugs, so lots of sucking insects.
Nice, yeah, and we'll talk about that in just a minute, but can you kind of walk us through some of your interesting things that you found in your study, all the way from, what did you say, stock-eyed flies, all the way up to,
first, I guess.
Yeah, mosquitoes, you're right, yeah. So kind of just walk us through some of those cool projects that you got to work on.
Sure. So a lot of what I've always worked on are I've always been very interested in choice, so a lot of what we do is about why things choose what they choose. As an undergraduate, a lot of what we looked at was why mosquitoes sometimes lay their eggs in different places. So why they might choose one puddle over another.
Right.
Or why they hatch at different times and things. When I worked on stock-eyed flies, right, that's very complicated. So we were interested in why girl flies like boy flies with really long eye stalks. Mm-hmm. So why they choose which mates they choose.
Yeah.
It's very complicated genetics, but basically girls like boys with long eye stalks.
Yeah.
Which is a classic story.
Yeah.
And then my PhD I was interested in why some carpenter bees live together and some don't. So some are social like other kinds of bees where they'll live with their sisters, sort of.
Right.
And some live all by themselves, and they don't have any workers, and they don't have any friends.
Right.
They do everything themselves.
Yeah.
So a lot of what I was interested in that, and then also why some males choose to keep territories, why they fight off all the other males, and why others don't.
Yeah.
And so that's what I did. And then, let me think. So then when I worked on parasitoids, so it's more choices in a way, we were interested in why some parasitoids, which are like little wasps that lay eggs and other things, right? Why do they choose some host species? Why some aphids lay their eggs in and not others? And whether or not, if you get sort of desperate. So if you get old, you become less choosy.
Right.
And similar questions when I worked on psyllids. Why do they pick different plants to lay their eggs on? And now in my lab, my students, we ask all kinds of questions that are like that.
Yeah. So talk a little bit more about your lab and your students that you're working with right now.
So I have a very big lab, so we work on all kinds of things. So we tend to work on 3 big things. So one big group of things we work on are called aster leafhoppers. They're little insects that, kind of like an aphid, so they fly around, and they're disease vectors. So the same way a mosquito moves disease around people and things, these move diseases around plants.
Okay.
And they eat lots of different plants, and so part of what we're interested in is why they eat different plants and how they choose different plants. And which plants are more healthy and less healthy for them, so like which is good growing food for a mosquito, for a leafhopper.
Right.
And then also, why do some plants get sick from the bacteria that the insects move around? How come some others don't? Then we work a lot on aphids, and we ask similar questions. Why do the aphids like some plants and not others? Or why do some get sick and not others? So that's 2 things we do. And then another one of my students is really interested in how things like climate change and pollution make plants different for bees. So if you have bees and you say, like, do you want a happy plant or a sad plant? Can bees tell the difference? And what kinds of happy plants and sad plants can they tell apart? And then if you eat a sad plant, for instance, so if you're a bee and your world only has sad plants, will you have less workers, or will you be smaller than if you have lots of happy plants? And he does very cool stuff because he actually is interested also in how different kinds of metal can pollute plants that the bees eat. And so he actually gets to use the particle accelerator to see where the metal goes. So he puts bees in a particle accelerator, which is
That's
kind
crazy.
of the coolest thing you can do.
That is really cool. Yeah. Okay, so I think have we covered your research like pretty well so far, or I'm sure there's so much more because you've been doing it for so long, right? But were there any other fascinating things that you found throughout your career so far?
I think everything we do is fascinating. We're lucky because we get to chase fascinating stuff. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, so I was wondering, where did you originally get interested in entomology? What kind of drew you in originally?
It's a good question. I didn't actually think I was going to be an entomologist. I was going to be I was sort of interested in biology.
Right.
I just had 2 choices. I could work on fish and I could work on mosquitoes. Those were the options in front of me when I wanted to do research. And the fish lab was boring, and the mosquito lab seemed like they were doing stuff I was more interested in. And I think I sort of started working on insects and realized that a lot of the things that were neat about biology to me were fairly well suited for insects. I could do more with them.
Yeah.
And so I kind of became an entomologist, I guess, because I worked on insects, really, not the other way. It wasn't like I wasn't someone who loved bugs.
Wanted to go work on insects.
No,
It was kind of the other way around.
Yeah. I had all kinds of things I was interested in, and insects were a neat way of looking at it. I think sometimes we'll tell people, like, well, there are 5 million species of insect or something. And so if you're interested, like I guess I was, which is why things do things and how they evolve and how they interact.
Right.
If you have a lot of something, then there's a lot more of them to look at than if you only have like 5 of them.
Yeah, more data. Yeah, for sure.
And more species to compare, and more things that do weird stuff, right? Insects do cool stuff, and if you're interested in like why do things do cool stuff, there are more insects doing cool stuff than there are like birds.
Yeah, I mean, we're not biased or anything, but yeah.
Well, it's numerical. I mean, there's just lots more of them, right?
Yeah, there is more. Yeah, a lot more. Okay, so moving on, like, who do you kind of look up to? Who's your inspiration with doing all this? Did you have a mentor or someone that you want to mention for that? Like, who do you look up to, and who's your inspiration for all this?
So I had a lot of mentors along the way, right? I was very lucky that way. But the person who I think in some ways, when I look back now, 20 years later, made is someone I got to just work with during the summers when I was an undergraduate, and it's a guy named Douglas Morse. He's now retired. He was a professor at Brown University, and he was an expert on spiders, crab spiders, and I think he made a big difference for me because he, the way he examined things, the way he thought about things, turns out to have influenced a lot about how we look at problems.
Right. Yeah. Very cool. Yeah, that's awesome. So. In your spare time, do you have any other hobbies or interests that you have outside or maybe related to entomology in your spare time?
Most of my hobbies have nothing to do with entomology. Let's see.
Nice.
I play trumpet. I like to play ultimate frisbee. I work out at the gym. We listen to music.
Nice. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I think it's important to have something like that to kind of wind down and get away from entomology. But also, a lot of people I've realized have hobbies that kind of like entomology hobbies that kind of sneak their way in, that are still entomology related, like hiking, and then you find a bug anyway, right?
Well, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Certainly, I can't go anywhere and not have people like, "What's that bug?
Yeah.
What's that?"
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so moving on to, like, what are your big plans for the future? What are you thinking for the future of this lab and your students, and what are your big goals for the future? Maybe fun trips you want to go on.
Well, so I'm very lucky because I actually get to go on trips pretty soon. So I'm actually hoping, if everything goes to plan, I'll actually go to Australia next summer. So,
Nice. That's
or
awesome.
next fall.
Okay,
Summer.
yeah.
Summer, then fall for us.
Yeah.
Other side of the world. So that'll be really exciting. And so we're going to collect insects, but also viruses, because we're really interested in the viruses that the insects move around.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm really fortunate also because my lab has a quarantine, so we have a special facility that we can collect things that don't belong in places and bring them back and work on them. So we're going to get all kinds of cool stuff to bring back and to see how they would live in our climate and stuff. So
Nice.
we're really excited about that because we're going to have all kinds of new bugs to play with.
That's really awesome. That's exciting. Yeah, so you can go and collect all kinds of stuff, and
Yep.
nice. And do you have like special permission for that, or is Australia completely okay with that?
No. So we have a special room. It's what's more than that. It's a series of rooms. So,
Right.
So it's a special facility.
Right.
And it's built to do just to keep things that would be dangerous from escaping. So it has lots of all kinds of things. There's special rules about it, and there are suits you have to wear, and it has screens and doors and all kinds of things. And so because we have that, we can get special permits from what Australia or anyone else will want to send some from. So we have to get a permit usually to make it leave the country it's in, and a
Right.
permit to receive it in Canada, where we live.
Nice.
And then everything gets packaged up specially and sent straight to the new special facility. And so it doesn't even get opened. It arrives, and then when it gets to the special place, then they open it up inside this quarantine behind all these doors and stuff. So
Wow.
there's lots and lots and lots of rules.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's a great opportunity. That's a really great resource. I don't think I've heard of that before, so that's really awesome.
There's not very many. They exist. There's certainly other people here at the Entomological Society meeting that have access to some of them, but they're pretty rare and they're pretty expensive. So the one that we have that I work with is only one of really two that can have the same stuff that we can. So there's different levels, but the level that we have, which is sort of almost the top, we're one of only two really in the entire western half of Canada. So
Wow.
they're very rare.
That's really awesome. Wow, what a great resource. That's really awesome. So, so where can my viewers go to learn more about you, or what you've been working on, or maybe your lab, like any social media or
Crazy.
website or anything like that?
They can go to our lab website. So it's www.prager, Prager, lab.ca.
Nice.
So that's nice and easy. And then we have a Twitter, so it's at USaskBugs, and it's the same for Instagram.
Awesome.
So
Yeah.
Bugs.
So they can go there and follow along, and that's awesome.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, you're very welcome.
This was
This is
super fun. Yeah, great to meet you and talk with you as well.
Oh, you too. It's
Yeah.
really good.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Lil Dudes Insect Academy podcast. If you enjoyed it, definitely consider dropping a follow on whatever platform you're listening on. And also, Lil Dudes Insect Academy is a nonprofit organization. So if you're passionate about science communication, entomology, outreach, and education, and you enjoy what we're doing and how we're solving that gap, then consider heading over to our website and donating there, or becoming a monthly donor via our Patreon, which is also linked in the show notes of this episode. Yeah, so share this episode with one of your friends, and tune in next week. I will see you all next week, and with that, keep on bugging.